Sudden oak death was first discovered in the mid-1990s, when thousands of trees in California's coastal forests began to die. Most of these trees had brown leaves, and sap was leaking out of them, hence the term bleeding trees. The cause of these symptoms was unknown. Within weeks, affected trees die, so scientists called it sudden oak death. Although many people thought it was caused by insects, the culprit was discovered to be a fungus-like organism, Phytophthora ramorum. P. ramorum typically reproduces by producing spores and chlamydospores. It is known to have a host range of more than 150 plant species, including those that are not trees. In fact, it is believed that a plant called rhododendron was the initial vector for P. ramorum. Nonetheless, the disease condition is called sudden oak death because it was first identified on oak trees and also because of its devastating effect on oak trees.
Here is a perfectly healthy and friendly oak tree standing around minding his own business. Oh, and here appears a suspicious looking pathogen named Phytophthora ramorum. This pathogen looks like it's up to no good. It seems that the pathogen and oak tree are getting dangerously close to each other. I hope the pathogen isn't planning to do anything to that poor oak tree. Oh no! The evil pathogen hopped onto the oak tree and infected it. Now that the pathogen infected the oak tree, what is it going to do to it? The pathogen begins to spread all over the tree and causes the plant to have cankers to appear on its trunk. Things are looking very grim for our friend, the oak tree. The cankers seem to be too much for the plant to bear as it destroys its vascular tissues. This leads to the death of the kind oak tree, all because of the leader of sudden oak death, Phytophthora ramorum.
What are the common symptoms of infection? Leaves will appear drought-stressed and sometimes their color changes to dull green, brown, yellow, red, or purple as they wither. Infected bark will be water-soaked and red-brown discoloration and sometimes an odor. Bleeding cankers form at the base of the trunk and eventually lead to death. P. ramorum infection is usually followed by beetle infestation and/or an alternate pathogen infection. Because these symptoms are very similar to other common fungal infections, a lab test sample is required for positive identification of the disease. It is important to note that the severity of the infection varies. Phytophthora does not only affect oaks, nor does it kill every plant or tree it infects. Some hosts mainly suffer only foliage infection and/or leaf lesions. For instance, it has been discovered that infected tan oaks may not show the characteristic symptoms of bleeding cankers. So how does the pathogen affect infected trees? Although the mechanism involved are still under investigation, research suggests that the severity of the disease is not generally due to the lack of resistance or tolerance to the pathogen, but instead the ability of the pathogen to survive harsh conditions.
It mainly affects tan oaks, coastal live oaks, and other true oaks. Sudden oak death first occurs when the pathogen, P. ramorum, colonizes the outer bark of a viable oak tree. The Oomycete proceeds to infect the inner bark and phloem, where it colonizes and grows. From there, disease symptoms manifest through the development of a canker in the tree's bark. These cankers can develop from the base of the trunk to about 25 meters up the tree. Notably, these cankers have only been observed to develop on adult true oaks, while in tan oaks they can occur at any stage of the life cycle. Next, the cankers proceed to grow and bleed this clear reddish-brown exudant, which is the defining characteristic of the disease. The fluid develops near the phloem and proceeds to penetrate outward through the inner bark. As the canker grows, the accumulation of dead bark and phloem cells cuts off sugar transportation throughout the tree. The disease progresses faster if the pathogen manages to infect a sapwood where the xylem is located. When the xylem is infected, the tree is unable to move water to the top of the tree, thus creating a decaying crown. The tree is eventually choked to death as its sugar and water transportation systems are essentially cut off. One characteristic of Pyrrhomorum is that it doesn't produce sporangia or spores in canker-infected hosts. Trees that develop cankers are actually dead ends for the pathogen, and once the host dies, the pathogen soon follows. Pyrrhomorum actually produces its spores on the leaves of non-oak hosts, which causes damage to these plants. In most cases, infection of the leaves leads to petiole and twig necrosis, along with a host of other symptoms. Once the spores are formed, they can spread by rainfall, wind, or by animal and human carriers until they reach a viable host. These spores mainly travel during the wet/rainy seasons, since water efficiently distributes them over short distances. Though they can spread to waterways, such as rivers, which allows them to travel farther distances. Another important method of transmission is through infected nursery soil. Spores often spread quickly in nurseries as the plants are kept in close proximity and are watered often. Pyrrhomorum spores can lay dormant in soil that has come into contact with infected plants. This is a tremendous problem as internationally shipped trees have led to the spread of sudden oak death to many other countries. This may have also been the mechanism of how the pathogen originally came to Europe and North America.
We should care about sudden oak death because oak woodlands are an integral part of California's biodiversity, as they harbor 300 vertebrate species, 5,000 arthropod species, and 1,100 native vascular plant species. Since we're living in California, it is important that we help contain the spread of sudden oak death as much as possible. When oaks disappear, a domino effect occurs due to the fact that oak trees are keystone species. This basically means that oak trees are needed for the ecosystem to thrive. For example, the acorns the oak tree produces acts as a food source for more than 100 species of wildlife. And if you still don't care about any of these reasons sudden oak death is of major concern, just think about how iconic oak trees are and that they are one of the reasons California is such a beautiful place. One of the treatments for sudden oak death is a two-pronged approach. This approach starts with Phosphajet, which is a systemic fungicide that is applied via micro-injecting it into susceptible trees. After this treatment, the next step is to treat the soil with humates or high-quality organic matter. Since Phytophthora lives easily in anaerobic soils, treating the soil with humates will decrease the chance of the pathogen living in the soil as they will increase soil aeration.